for joining us. First and foremost, the most important announcement is that there are donuts, coffee in the back. Please help yourself multiple times if you need to. There's enough for everyone. I do want to go ahead and call to order the July 23rd community workshop on fees for the village's short-term rental ordinance. First and foremost, we'll start with a brief introduction. We don't have the full council here, but as I said, I'm Councilperson Darian Martin, and I'm hosting our workshop this morning. Next to me is, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Vice Mayor Anders Urban.
Awesome.
Glad to be here.
Awesome. We also have our village manager, Ms. Christian Liu, and we have our code enforcement officer, Mr. Carlos Herrera, joining us as well so that they can add some more color to the conversation. Before we go ahead and delve into the conversation, I do just want to set some expectations and parameters for the conversation that I think need to be stated. Today, what we're doing is we're talking about fees. So we're not talking about whether or not we should have a short-term rental ordinance in the village of El Portal, because we already have one. We've gone through both readings of the ordinance, and it is the law of the land. However, what we're talking about today are the fees associated. And when I say fees, I mean 3 fees in particular. What is that initial application fee to receive your license so you can operate the short-term rental in El Portal? What is that renewal fee that would happen upon the end of the first term of this program? And also, we can discuss any fees associated with inspections that might pop up. When it comes to the fees that are associated with violating the ordinance, those are already enumerated in our ordinance and not something that would be pertinent for the conversation today. So with that being stated, in addition to that, I want everyone to know that what we're discussing today is exactly that, a discussion. We're not taking any official action today. The official action setting the particular fees for the ordinance will happen, I believe, in the upcoming council meeting, or maybe one that's subsequent, but this is not a council meeting and this is simply a workshop. So I encourage you to participate robustly in the conversation and know that we are taking your feedback and opinions on the topic, but whatever we discuss today is that it's information to help us make a better decision, but no action this morning could be final. We don't have a complete council. In addition to that, that's not what the intention for the meeting is today. So with that being said, I think the very first stop, I am going to run this as a quasi meeting. I'm going to allow our manager to give us her recommendations, open up the conversation to the members of the council that are present, and then allow any of the attendees to step up to the podium and give their remarks as well. When you do step up to the podium, I would really like to get to know you. So if you can state your name and your address, and also if you're comfortable, you could let us know whether or not you currently operate a short-term rental, either in the village of El Portal or in a neighboring village, so we know exactly where your perspective is coming from. That would be super, super helpful. So with that being said, I'm going to ask our manager to give us her recommendations as far as a reasonable fee for this ordinance.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Councilperson Martin. Thank you, Vice Mayor, for hosting the meeting and us addressing these fees. As you stated, we're looking to address the licensing permit fee for the short-term vacation rental license, the renewal fees, the inspections, and I also ask that we consider just a look at the local business tax receipt amount. So my recommendation for the short-term rental is really based on the administrative impact that the new ordinance holds. It will require the village the administration to get some technology. I mean, we have one-person departments, one code enforcement officer, excuse me, one building official with 2 building clerks. So we, are working at full speed with other items, but adding short-term rental will require us to acquire some kind of technology. We have looked at some different firms and have been provided quotes for those things. We have software by host compliance that I'm really leaning toward that is $3,700 annually, or if we amplify our monitoring and management of the short-term vacation rental ordinance, we can even consider something that would be a lot more a higher level of monitoring through a company, Harmari, that quoted us at $9,800 annually. But the code enforcement building impacts will be critical in this application of this ordinance. Also, there's an impact to public safety and police. It includes the parking, the noise, after-hours code enforcement, curfew enforcement, sex offender monitoring due to the proximity to the schools in some instances as well. So there are some challenges, or maybe not challenges, but some increased responsibilities that come with this for our police department. Also for our public works department, solid waste, the maintenance of the right-of-ways and supplemental to the property owners' requirements, as well as clerical, just the registrations, the renewals, operating the technology, and just follow-ups and file maintenance. The inspections we'll discuss, but this will be an increased inspection, something beyond what is presently required from the building department when there are renovations and what have you. So that too will be an impact financially to the village. So my recommendation is for $900 for the short-term rental application license. My recommendation is also to have a $250 annual inspection fee that the property owner will set up as part of its application for the short-term vacation rental, and the renewal fee to be $750. I recommend this because, again, of the impacts and the potential for the village in this respect. And as you stated, we already have the penalties already enumerated, but I also proffer that we include inspections arising from complaints, perceptions, and for cause also be charged $250 per incident, plus whatever the code violation is associated with that. And that we also bypass any courtesy notices and warnings and go straight to citation and fine. That is my recommendation. If anyone has any questions, we're open to discuss.
Definitely, and I do want to recognize that the mayor has entered the building. Mayor Nickerson, if you'd like to, there's a seat. Completely up to you. It's good to see you. Like I said, we would initially get the manager's recommendation, open it up to members of the council to discuss first impressions, and then allow our audience members to participate as well. So, Councilman, Vice Mayor Erbaum, do you have any comments or questions?
Yeah. Thank you to Code Enforcement Officer Herrera for compiling these fees from other municipalities, a more extensive list than I think we had. Was it you did that? Okay, all right. He was showing me the file that he was working on. So yeah, okay. Thank you sincerely, Madam Manager, for doing that. I know that was one of the key questions at the last time we met was what other municipalities are doing. And so from speaking with Code Enforcement Officer Herrera, like Village of Biscayne Park, which is, of course, a near neighbor to us, similar in demographic, he was explaining the reason they don't have a renewal fee or a licensing fee is because they're still in the same process we are in terms of trying to establish what that is. So some of you might remember the last time we met, my opinions on what these fees should be. As we go through all of this, I don't see this as we're trying to do an ordinance to either encourage or discourage short-term rentals. We're trying to create a level playing ground for all residents in the village, as well as the CYA aspect of liability issues and things like this as short-term rentals become more prevalent. So from that standpoint, the last time we met, my opinion was and remains that we do already have in place law enforcement. We do already have in place code enforcement. We do already have in place with line items already in the budget for these services, and in that what we're doing here, I don't see what we're doing as being something that's going to radically increase the number of short-term rentals that we have in the village. Again, it's a way to protect the village in terms of liability issues, protect the residents to the same degree. So I feel fairly strongly that we should remain near the low end of application fees and the low end of renewal fees, because as those fees increase, in my opinion, as those fees increase, you are then inviting larger entities, LLCs, corporations, to be able to take advantage of whatever ordinances we put in place before and in front of residents who are only trying to operate maybe a room in the house or a mother-in-law building, detached, things to this effect, right? So I do feel strongly that in terms of the fees, the application and renewal, we really should remain near the low end, so that the residents first in line, before an outside LLC or a corporation, the residents have as much of an equal opportunity to. It's really the residents that we want to be engaged in this. We don't really have a desire to be inviting large corporations or absentee owners and things like that to be engaging in these activities, because that's when you get some of the larger challenges, problems, et cetera, associated with short-term rentals. So I think if we price out just at the beginning of application fees, we're going to be kind of shooting ourselves in the foot a little bit in terms of almost encouraging a lot of the behaviors that we're trying to prevent, honestly. So in that regard, additionally, the point I had made at the last meeting was that we want, ideally, 100% of anybody operating a short-term rental to be registered with the village. And to accomplish that, I also feel strongly that a nominal application fee and a nominal renewal fee is appropriate, because that is going to encourage a higher level of participation. It eliminates an argument for, well, I'm just going to do this on the sly, because with a lower application fee and a lower renewal fee, that's not such an obstacle. I know the issue has been raised of people who do not engage in short-term rentals year-round. It might be seasonal, it might be occasionally, it might be a couple times a year. And that actually is an ideal situation for the village in terms of the scope of in the family of short-term rentals. That's an ideal situation, I think, for the village. So again, with keeping in mind that the goal here is participation. In my mind, the goal is participation. We're doing this, we want participation. And so I will advocate strongly for low application fees, low renewal fees. The teeth of this thing comes into our ability to enforce the regulations that are in place through the ordinance, right? And again, we have law enforcement in place, we have code enforcement in place. It will be, I don't know if it's going to be a significantly extra burden on those services, because we already have short-term rentals in the village. And so those services are already essentially being utilized as we speak in the existing line items within the budget to be able to address any issues that arise from a transient occupant, a short-term rental, whatever you want to call it. So so that's my 2 cents as we go through this. I think that the penalty structure which we've established, is the one thing, and our ability to enforce the regulations within the ordinance. The last point I'll make before I stop talking here is communication. So when it comes to solid waste issues, when it comes to parking issues, when it comes to even noise ordinance and these types of things, that is a combined effort between the village and the residents to be able to provide enough information on someone coming into, so I book a short-term rental, I come into the beautiful village of El Portal, and the person operating the short-term rental has left me with, like a welcome package type of thing. Could be an email, could be physical, whatever. But the point being that it's in that initial document of welcome to your, vacation rental. Here are the ground rules, right? Here are the laws of the village you're in. And so would outline trash and recycle days, which bin is for trash, which bin is for recycling, where you're allowed to park, where you're not allowed to park, how many occupants are you allowed to have at any given time, how many overnight occupants are you allowed to have, and the noise that would be permitted and the types of activities that would be permitted or prohibited within that. So I feel very strongly that if we are able to work together with the residents to be able to give them enough information to provide to their guests, that will radically mitigate problems that we have in terms of noise ordinances, in terms of solid waste, in terms of parking, and a nuisance, overall nuisance to neighbors and friends and neighbors. So, so for me, the communication aspect of this is the critical matter of discussion, and the application and renewal fees for me should truly be nominal so that we can get as much participation as possible.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Erbaum. I'll go ahead and I'll chime in, and then I'll pass along to the mayor. So I do agree with you that the crux of what I like about this ordinance is the piece where the operator's license can be revoked. I feel like hitting people in their pockets is really what is going to force them to take those proactive steps to bring themselves into compliance. And I do want the program to run as lean as possible. We're definitely not trying to make money here, but what we are trying to do is have an effective ordinance. And that means being able to identify all of the people who are operating short-term vacation rentals. And there are people who are like you guys who are very upfront about the fact that you're running a short-term vacation rental. You want to come into compliance. You want to be very transparent with the city, follow our rules, the whole nine, and we love that. But understand that there are operators that feel the complete opposite. There are people who list their vacation rentals at 8 p.m. to try to evade detection by code enforcement officers. It's called vampire listings. There are over now 100 websites where you can go to and you can reserve a vacation rental. And when I think about the scope of that, I think to myself, hey, can our one code enforcement officer in the village of El Portal monitor this program in a way that ensures compliance, not from the actors that are very upfront and forthcoming with their intentions and their operations of their short-term vacation rentals, but from those who are not so upfront and forthcoming and do not intend to abide by our restrictions for special event permits or noise ordinances or bulk trash, or it's a daunting task to think about how many people there are that are trying to operate outside of the parameters that we have set forth for good operating of a short-term vacation rental. And I think that is what gives me pause to go as low as possible, because I do think that we are going to have to look at getting a third party to administer this program, because it is such a daunting task to monitor over 100 websites, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, to identify those that are not in compliance or not registered with the city. So that part gives me pause as to whether or not we can just go with a skeleton structure and put that on the plate of Mr. Herrera, because in addition to administering this program, he's also going to have to conduct all his regular code enforcement duties. So That's the first part. The second part is, I don't know who it was in the last meeting, but someone brought up the fact that Hollywood, the city of Hollywood, treats the owner-occupied residences a little differently than those that are not owner-occupied. And I remember prior to, Attorney Geller said that that was not something that was available to us, but I would like him to look into whether or not that is true, or if there is something that can happen that would allow us to enumerate out a different fee structure for an owner-occupied residence or dwelling, because I think historically, and if we look at other cities, those dwellings that are owner-occupied usually have less instances of running afoul of those noise ordinances, and those other things become nuisances in the city. So I would like for the attorney to get back to us prior to us setting those fees so that we can see whether or not we can have a different set of fees for owner-occupied dwellings, because I get that there's some people who really are not trying to make money doing this thing. They're just trying to make ends meet, and by no means do I want to stop that. And I also want to remind everyone that the definition of what a short-term vacation rental, I think, doesn't contemplate the person who just wants to rent their home twice a year. I think you have to do it more than 3 times a year for a period of less than 30 days. So that's when you fall into the short-term vacation rental box, and that's when this ordinance is triggered. So I think for the passive participants in short-term vacation rentals, it's really trying to do this just on Christmas or when they're away. And you can correct me if I'm correct, or Attorney Geller can correct me if I'm incorrect. I don't think that this applies to you in any real way. However, the goal for me is to have an effective ordinance, not just to have an ordinance. And if we have an ordinance where the only people participating are the people who are going to follow the rules anyway, and those people that would shirk their responsibility and shirk the village's requirement to register, if we have no way of finding them and bringing them into compliance, then that's a problem, because sometimes the nuisance that they create is not one that is easily discoverable or addressed. Some people are going around, they rent out this place and they throw a gigantic party, and by the time you call the police officers, it's midnight. The police officers are going to prioritize a noise violation very low on the list of things to respond to, and by the time they respond, the nuisance has already abated itself, and there is no real way to address that, and somebody has been inconvenienced, right? So what we're trying to do is balance the right of the property owner, for sure, to utilize their property in the way that they want to, and for business owners to conduct good business in the city. But we also have to protect the residents that want to quietly enjoy their property, and I think honestly should not bear the brunt of the nuisance that is created by sometimes a very absent owner or disinterested owner that allows a nuisance of noise or other nuisances to proliferate on their property. So I do want a low fee, but I don't want this to cost the city anything, and I want the city to be able to effectively administer the program, and I think that contemplates outsourcing this to a third-party vendor. And I'll go ahead and pass it to, okay,
So,
Vice Mayor Arbol.
so just in the discussion of the monitoring, and then the extra duties that would be required of Mr. Herrera. So if we take $20,000 a year of his time, divided by the 133 listings identified, we're at $150 per listing. And then if we take I put $4,000 for the base monitoring, divided by the 133 listings, it's essentially a little more than $30 all combined. We're at $200. So I think if we had a renewal fee, I think if we had an application fee of down $300 or even a little bit lower, and the renewal fee of maybe $200, I think we're already there in terms of covering those base costs. with the existing listings, assuming again that we could get 100% participation. And again, I just feel so strongly that to get that 100% participation, and keeping an application fee and renewal fee nominal is how we're going to get that high percentage of participation, which with the high percent of participation alleviates some of the groundwork in terms of man hours required for identifying who all the short-term rentals are. If you have them coming in voluntarily, logic says you're spending less man hours hunting them down, right? And so the other part of it was, I'll think of it in a second, on the owner-occupied versus absentee, I would also I would consider anyone who had 2 properties in El Portal, so they live in El Portal, but they're operating one of their properties as short-term rental, qualify as an owner-occupied for the fact that our village is a postage stamp. So if there's an issue on a property and the owner lives in the village, I believe that they do have the ability to actively be monitoring the property in almost the same way as someone who's actually living at the property. We're not talking about a 30-minute commute to get to the property. So I would consider that extension of someone being, if that ends up being an avenue we could pursue. So
Noted. Mr. Bear, do you have something that you want to chime in on?
Just really quickly.
Sure.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it. Good to see everybody here. Just want to say very quickly, and I know you guys probably went over this, but the thing about this is that whatever comes out of today, I think the goal for today, I think, is to at least get about, if not 100% there, which would be ideal, Madam Chair, about 80 or 85% there. You guys all know that the ordinance doesn't kick in until the fees are voted on and passed through resolution. We do not have a meeting in August. Our next meeting is the end of September. So at the very earliest, the ordinance would not even kick in until the 4th Tuesday of September, which is a couple of months from now, at the very earliest. Between now and then, we have all this time to where whatever comes out of today, residents can still contact us. We can still talk about the night of the meeting, the 4th Tuesday of September. We can still talk about it then. So it's not until that passes that all of this stuff gets kicked off and goes into effect. I think that what the manager came up with, and I appreciate this, Madam Chair, for having this town hall, Madam Manager, for putting this all together. What she came up with is understandable. I think we really have to look at operational fees. I think we really have to look at what it's going to take to do the ordinance consistently and constantly at the level it needs to be taken care of, you guys. I think that if we just kind of like try to make it so that we're at the bare minimum of maybe this will work, maybe this will work, this is just enough money to get past to do what we need to do, we might be undercutting ourselves. We have to be really, really careful with that. You have to understand that we are the smallest municipality in Miami-Dade County with the smallest budget in Miami-Dade County. We have the smallest staff, Madam Manager, in Miami-Dade County. The code enforcement officer right now is every day, comes in on Saturdays also, and works from home, making up for over 1,000 open code enforcement cases he's trying to catch up with from the past decade. 1,517 cases. So as the chairperson said, Chairperson Martin, we're probably going to have to go with an outside company. We just don't have the staff. We have now, finally, Madam Manager, we have a brand new police department that's catching up on everything from the past and implementing all the new things to catch up or tile up into 2022 when it comes to law enforcement. So we definitely need to go with an outside company. I think we should just kind of think about if we get to a point to where what we need to charge operationally is considered too much by the residents, then maybe there's things that we might want to look at the ordinance and remove from the ordinance that causes us to charge this much money. We might want to look at the ordinance and say, let's take this out, let's take this out. Because if we don't enforce these particular things that we may not need, then we don't have to put things in place to have to charge for those particular things. But as long as the ordinance says exactly what it says, and the manager looked at everything that we have to secure and we have to enforce because of what's in the ordinance, and she comes up with this number because of the services that's needed to enforce what's in the current ordinance, and this is the number that's needed to be enforced for operational costs. So we may want to consider looking at the ordinance and taking out certain things from the ordinance, and that'll bring the cost down for enforcement. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All righty. Just in the interest of having you guys have the opportunity to come up and address the council, Madam Manager, I'll let you insert something. Go
Okay,
ahead.
thank you. It'll be quick.
No worries.
Yes, the ordinance is very heavy on enforcement, and the inspections that are required within the ordinance call for an inspection after every guest leave. That we just don't have the manpower for that, and we don't have the resources for it. So that is why I have proffered that we do one annual inspection, and then for cause or for some, we could even consider it quarterly, but that is just such a labor-intensive activity for us to have to do with one code enforcement officer. I also looked at the owner-occupied. We already have LLCs owning homes here in the village of El Portal, so that horse is out of the barn. We also have the issue of when there are curfews on Miami Beach. The people aren't going to be renting there. They'll come here where there is no curfew. Miami Shores has a more restrictive policy, and they charge $960 for the first year for their application as well, because we have a more attractive area for people who want to have the party houses. If we separate out the owner-occupied, perhaps that would, be a better solution. So if we're looking at the ordinance, I really encourage that to be a thought about that as well.
And Madam Manager and I have had a lot of discussions about the inspection requirement. I don't think that there is a affirmative requirement placed on us to inspect that frequently. And I think also practically, if we look at neighboring municipalities, usually there's an initial inspection and then an inspection if there is any sort of a complaint or report of there being a existence of some sort of violations in the standards of operations. So I don't think that the requirement is that intense, because I do think that any municipality that would be charged with inspecting after every occupant, that would be unmanageable for, I believe, everyone. And how would we also know, like, when the renter is leaving? But so that's something that we definitely have gone back and forth on, and I don't think that requirement is affirmatively placed on us in our ordinance. But I understand what you're saying, and I do believe that the condition already exists, where there are corporations who own homes and use the homes just strictly for profit in the village of El Portal. And it's something that, for sure, we do need to address. So with that being said, I do want everyone in the audience to have an opportunity to participate in the conversation. So I'll go ahead and open it to you guys. I know, Pasquale, you definitely have everyone. We'll start with Pasquale. If you can head up to the podium and give me your name and address for the record, that would be great.
Good morning. My name is Pascal Depoule. I live at 177 Northwest 90th Street. We own 6 rental places in 3 different municipalities here, all within a couple minutes of here. We have rented homes in the area for over 20 years, just so you guys know our background. You guys know where I stand on the ordinance. I think the smaller and leaner it is, the better. So I like the idea of the mayor to revisit some of the things that we have addressed in the past, where we're talking about inspections like soap and linens and things that are already regulated by other departments, to be taken out of that, because there's no reason, and I don't understand how we would figure out how that gets enforced anyway. I do agree with the manager. There are a lot of things, especially on the application side, if we're talking about that fee, that you guys have to check on us in terms of all the licensing that we need to provide. I have questions on almost every single one of them on what kind of documentation I would need to provide. Like, for instance, ownership, is a utility bill enough, or do I need to give a title deed or any of that thing? I don't know if you guys want to go through that at some point, because I do think anybody who wants to try to comply with the ordinance as it is right now is going to have questions on everything that is expected of us. In terms of especially just the licensing thing. We, for instance, have a license from the state of Florida and from Miami-Dade County that is a combined license for multiple properties, that if you go and pull my license, you will not see the actual property addresses. It just says there are so many units on this license. So I'm not sure exactly what I need to do to provide and prove that I actually have a license for this property. I have examples of it with me if you guys want to see them. Owner-occupied. I'm sorry, go ahead.
One second. The manager has some input on that, so maybe you can get some clarity now on it.
We are preparing the application package right now. Well, I've done a draft, and we're reviewing it. But in terms of those questions, they will be addressed in the application package. But just showing like a utility bill would be, to show ownership. You'll have to have the.
Isn't there an affidavit that they
Yes,
could sign as well?
affidavits,
That
all
just
of those
says that
things.
you're an
It's
owner?
all enumerated in the ordinance, but we've reduced it down to at a glance for, so you'll get the information first and then the application afterwards, so that you'll know how to
I
fill
think
it in.
it'd be great to have that, just to say, in order to prove this license, I need your license number, or do I need a certificate, or do I? So that we
That'll
would
all be
know,
on the application.
and not just guess, because I know Miami Shores ordinance says if I give an application that gets kicked back and disapproved, they still charge me the full amount, and then I have to reapply. It's $750, by the way, not $950. But I want to prevent giving you guys the wrong thing, that you don't know how to check, or I give the wrong information that makes enforcement and the licensing harder on you. It takes more time, takes more money. The owner-occupied, we talked about last meeting. I agree. We have one place that's on our property that we use as a STR right now that is obviously incredibly easy for us to enforce because we're 50 feet away from it. The guests that we have staying there also understand that, and we've actually had guests not book that place because we're on the property. But we do the same with all the other properties. All of our neighbors know who we are, and we've asked them to call us or to reach out to us if there's an issue, so that we can address that even before police would be called or things there. We have technology in place to be able to monitor the properties as well remotely, so all of that stuff is great. But I do think, and we had it in the ordinance and the council kicked it out, where there was a distinction between somebody who is renting a part of their house that they live in versus somebody who buys a house and rents the house without occupying it. So if we're reopening that ordinance anyway, that may be something to look at and reinsert into the ordinance. It was in one of the first drafts. The ordinance as it's written right now does define STRs as anything over or under 3 months, and there is no exclusion of fewer than X times a year. So an owner that would rent their place for 1 day a year would fall under the same ordinance as it's written as we would if we rented 365 days a year. You guys have talked about us running a business as a short-term rental versus long-term rentals. We've had long-term rentals for over 2 decades, and as far as the IRS is concerned, it's a business. And I have the same issues in terms of noise complaints, problems, issues that I would have with an STR. And what we have said in the past 1,000,000 times, on a long-term rental, I know my tenant. I do criminal background checks, credit reports, I do call their landlords, I call their employers, I call personal references, so I have a really good handle on who I'm renting to, and even with all that background, I still have issues. We've done evictions on people that have not lived up to who we wanted to have. We do not have that with STRs. When I rent with Airbnb, I see that the person has given them their name, their phone number, and that their government-issued ID matches their name. That's it. I don't know anything else. So if we're looking at violations and taking courtesy notices away from violations, every guest is a first time for me. It's not a tenant that's been in for 1,000,000 years, for 7 years, for 6 years that constantly violates, and now the second and third offense is on the same person. The new guest that comes in, I don't know who they are until there's an issue. So I can't go and say, oh, wow, 60 days ago you had a noise violation. Well, completely different issue on who that was. I'm happy to take the burden of proving to you that it's two different people. It's easy enough to do with a calendar from our Airbnb, VRBO, whoever website does it, to show this is a different person, not the same. If it were the same person, I'm totally on board with having a second and third violation and the fees kick up. And then in the inspections, I'm in the same boat again as Madam Manager, that there's no way we can do it after every guest. We have a hard enough time scheduling our cleaning people after every guest, and to now have to schedule an inspector on one specific day that falls in between two bookings would be ridiculous. There's a bunch of other things I'd like to talk about, but I'll have some of the other people address that. I do want to talk about, or later, I know we talked about this a little earlier, the business tax receipt on El Portal. We don't have a fee for that. We don't know if I was here yesterday to fill it out. The office does not know if I can be a personal owner on that. They think I have to be a company. We don't have a fee in place for that. So there's a bunch of questions, especially for that one document that we need to furnish that El Portal actually gives us, that are still a question. And I know we're talking about fees today, so I'd love to talk about that fee as well.
All right, thank you so much for that comment. So I do want to emphasize that this is a fluid conversation, and the ordinance and the accompanying documents that will need to be filled out, this is still being built out, right? Like the mayor stated, we have probably until September before it's even the fees. Yeah, end of September, if then. So there are still a lot of things that the manager is working out that are actively being figured out. So I understand the frustration if you come to the office and the information is not readily available. But I do also want to ask for accompanying grace, because this is something that we are just doing and we are building out, similar to the Village of Biscayne Park, who they passed theirs, I believe, in January of 2022. Their short-term rental ordinance, and they're still working on this as well. There are a lot of moving parts, and we want to give you accurate and robust information, but it is a process. And the step that we're on now is the fee designation for the process. Also, I don't want to relitigate portions of the ordinance because the ordinance is in place. Neither do I want to state that for sure anything in the ordinance will change. But I do understand the desire to treat the owner-occupied short-term vacation rental very different from that which is just strictly non-owner-occupied in a business endeavor. Vice Mayor Erbaum, your suggestion of probably broadening the definition of what owner-occupied means in this setting is something that's interesting, and I think that something we will ask the attorney to look into. The reason why we initially did not choose to enumerate out a specific treatment for owner-occupied is because we were advised by the city's attorney not to. So that was a legal determination that was made by the village's attorney that we would be remiss not to follow. We're going to follow up with him and ask why this is allowed in Hollywood. What does he think about the legal grounds that ordinance is based on, and whether or not we could make a similar argument in the Village of El Portal, but that is something that is going to be a legal determination, and as a council, we would probably be on the best footing to follow what our attorney is advising us to do. We spoke about the noise, the issue that you brought up about, and I hate to go back to the fees, but the noise violation and all of those other things. In Hollywood and other communities, there's an active requirement to have noise monitoring devices placed in the unit. The whole point of it is not to violate you, but to make sure that that representative or the owner of the property is actively engaged in making sure that a nuisance doesn't proliferate on the property. So the goal of it, we're not requiring any sort of noise monitoring device, but the goal is that you wouldn't receive a violation because you would either say, hey, this is a part of operating my business in El Portal now. I will be proactive in monitoring the noise, and if I do hear a noise that exceeds a certain amount for a period of time, I will ask my representative to go out there and mitigate that issue so you don't even have an interaction with any sort of authority from El Portal. That would be the goal. So with that being said, I know there's another commenter. If you'd like to step to the podium. Yes, step to the podium and state your name and address for the record, please.
Good morning.
Good
My name
morning.
is Rodolfo Alonso. I live at 199 Northwest 90th Street. I've done some research since this all got started, in addition to the fact that I've been paying close attention to everything that had been mentioned and exposed by each council member, in addition to our city manager. And I do believe this is a great thing that we're doing, and our goal is one that would improve our community. And with that said, there are things that I think there's room for improvement. I understand there is an ordinance in place, and basically this is a workshop referring to fees. I did notice, first of all, thank you so much for, I understand it was Officer Herrera that took the time to prepare the material.
The
I'll
manager
take that
prepared
back, our manager,
Yes.
Krista. Thank you so much for doing that. It helps. I did notice that the city of Miami in itself is not listed here, which I think it should have been. And for city of Miami, the total application fee, including renewal, and the application fee and the renewal is under $250. So
I'm sorry.
The city of Miami does not allow that, those type of uses, only in multifamily and commercial areas. So in residential, they don't allow it. Not true. No, the city of Miami is saying.
I will further look into it. I don't want to assure something without actually being sure about it. So,
One second. If we can limit
Okay.
our comments to the mic so we don't have as much feedback.
basically, I said that we're gathered here today because we're doing a workshop, which is mainly referring to fees that are going to be charged to owners for short-term rental property in the city of El Portal. And I was also expressing my gratitude for the work being done by our manager, Krista, in preparing the documents that we were provided, which list what other municipalities are currently charging. And I mentioned that I did not see the city of Miami listed here, which I may be wrong, but I could swear I did read that their application fee is $125 for renewal, and also the actual application fee. But I may be off of that. If that is the case, I apologize.
I spoke with the city manager of City of Miami Beach, and it's actually the second one listed. Oh, okay. Oh, City of Miami. I'm sorry. Okay, we're all confused.
That's okay.
Oh, one second. If we can limit our conversation so that it's only the speaker on the mic that is speaking, that will make it easier for us to record and to understand each other. Go ahead.
Okay, and as I said, I've done some research and definitely pay close attention to what each of you have exposed, and share with us. And once again, first thing I would like to say is thank you. And with that said, I feel strongly about the fact that most short-term rental owners are more likely to comply when the fee that's being charged to them, I don't know if we use the word minimal, but the lower it is, most likely they are to comply. And that's just a fact. And indeed, I think our goal as a community, as a council member, is to make sure people are complying and that we know who they are. And this will be a lot easier to accomplish by having very reasonable fees. And I think that's just human nature, is a fact. I do feel strong, and I think it was our manager that mentioned something about no warning about when there's a violation. And I could not agree more with that personally. I don't know how the older short-term rental owners feel about that. But I do believe if you're breaking a rule, that's it. You broke a rule, and you know what you're not supposed to do. So no break on that. It should be a hefty violation. And between my partner and I, we run 3 short-term rentals, only one of them here out of El Portal, which is the home in the house where we live. And in doing this for 6 years, we never had an incident nor a complaint, ever. And I heard, and I'm like, inspections. Inspections. I think it was you, Krista, said that sometimes might even required to be done after each guest leave. That for me, I'm sorry, but I think that's insane. And who has the manpower to do that? That's like just not reasonable. And there are other incidents. I cannot even understand my own handwriting here. But I think it's a great thing that we're all here today, and we're doing this for the benefit of our community, of our village. And let's make sure we make the right decisions. And yes, once again, what Vice Mayor said, it's key to be successful, as to know what's happening. I understand that it will be extra work, but let's make sure we do the right math, and it's going to be decisive to the success of this if we charge the correct fee. And that's all I got to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Go ahead.
Happy Saturday, all. My name is Scott Russell, 199 Northwest 90th Street, El Portal. First, I want to applaud the Vice Mayor, as I did last session. I agree. I think the fee should be lower, and I think we are creating a situation here where it becomes a revenue stream. If you take the number currently, it's 133 units times the initial fee, it'd be 152,000 the first year. The yearly would be 166,250. I'm not sure where we equate the dollars for having even a separate maintenance that would cover that or exclude those costs. So to me, it looks like more of a profit center for the village. We have I have 2 short-term in the city of Miami. We had 1 inspection. The fee is below $250. I'm not sure why it was not included, because I did forward it to everyone after the last meeting. I think it should have been in the works. Miami Beach is totally separate. The city of Miami is its own entity. I believe the code hitting the vampire hunt, I applaud that. I think if you take your fees too high, you're going to have more of that situation more than less. I agree with the Vice Mayor bringing those numbers down to a reasonable $250, $300 level. You're going to get more compliance throughout the city. I applaud our code. You know, you walk around our village and our neighborhood, for example, there's so many code violations, driveways and new buildings and garages going up that are not addressed. So I applaud that, but I don't think that's going to be the situation with the code and for short-term rentals, especially an inspection after. It's crazy. If you're not doing a good business as a short-term rental, you're not going to be in business, period. My long-term rental is the same thing. You know, it is a business for us. It's definitely a revenue stream, but it shouldn't be a revenue stream for the village. So again, I applaud again the Vice Mayor's direction, and even the mayors maybe even take a look at what's in the ordinance, what Pasquale's saying. Some of this stuff is really unnecessary. If you want to come inspect that I have clean soap after every client, I'm not going to be in business. If I don't have white towels, I'm not going to be in business. We're rated as hosts, whether it's a VRBO platform, Airbnb, on how we perform. If we're not compliant and up to speed, we're not in business. And we've had 0 violations in any of our units. The only violations we've ever had in the city of El Portal, we had a wedding in our home. At 10 o'clock, the police were on the door. That's our bad. That was on us. So again, I think we're overdoing it here and just putting too much into this that really needs to be there. My 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you for the comment. Any other?
If I can make just
What?
Yeah, come on up, but I'm going to just make one clarification here.
Sure.
So I leaned over to the mayor and I said, you know, hey, is this what the language of the ordinance is, that there's an inspection after every unit? And really what it says is that there's a requirement on the operator to essentially, it's not listed as an inspection that occurs by El Portal on your property after each guest. What it is a requirement and I remember this discussion with the attorney at the time, it's a requirement of the operator to ensure that those things happen at the turnover. So just for clarification, there is not wording in the ordinance that says that there's going to be an inspection by the village after every tenant. And in the discussion with the attorney, I remember this specifically, there was a back and forth between Pascal and the attorney on this because of, and here we are with a little bit of confusion about it. And so to your point, but the point being that essentially that language of having to provide the fresh linens and soap and so forth, and essentially clean up after the guests to prepare for the new arrival are requirements that already are in existence through the DBPR and other agencies where you're already being licensed. And so it is a redundant requirement, but as the attorney had said, we put it in the ordinance because redundancy can be beneficial. I do believe that redundancy is beneficial because maybe, an operator doesn't read through all the DBPR information, but they read through the ordinance and see that, right? So just for clarification, there is not language in the ordinance that says that there will be an El Portal inspection after each guest. It's simply the onus is put on the operator to make sure that that occurs between guests, which is, of course, already established in other aspects of licensing, example being DBPR and things like that. So so hopefully we can put that issue.
So I don't think we can put it to rest because the manager reads it differently. So I do read it to mean that this is a standard of operation, not necessarily something that we need to inspect for after every occupant, because I think that is overly burdensome for sure and not necessarily feasible, I think, for most municipalities. The manager reads it differently, that there is some sort of affirmative requirement that we do so.
And I could speak for myself, but
Okay,
I can say
go ahead.
that
Go ahead.
yeah, I look at it as, so for the ordinance, yes, you're right, no, it's not stated there, but we need the ability to do the enforcement. I don't want there to be any issue of El Portal didn't do X, Y, and Z if something should happen. And so that is why I said, well, we could do the annual, or we could do quarterly, or we can figure something out, but it can't be after every visit.
So I agree
it
with
just
you.
needs to be something.
Right. So I agree
That's
with you
all.
that we're at an annual inspection, and then if
Right.
there's
A call, like, if-
for cause, right?
Right, for cause.
Annual inspection or for cause.
that's why
Yes.
I will settle on that. 'cause
Yes,
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's too much.
Okay, I think quarterly is too much. I think annual inspection for cause, I'm certainly in
Yeah.
agreement with that.
Right,
Yes.
and even the quarterly could be too much, because if we
Right.
are doing someone who just has, 3 months away for the summer and they rent their house out, they don't need a quarterly inspection.
Right, and my
So-
point only being that there's not language that mandates that after every guest, El Portal needs to inspect. So I think we're in agreement here, and as long as we can keep redundantly talking about it, we'll get there as far as clarity. So, all right.
Yeah.
All right.
I think it was put into our ordinance just for emphasis, because this is language that the DBPR has in there as well, but also by Florida statute, the DPBR requires an annual or biannual inspection, so I don't even think they contemplate inspections at that frequency. So I think that that's something that we all can kind of settle on, that in practice, most municipalities are requiring an initial inspection upon application for that license, and then renewal. And I think that might be a point for our manager to look into, as far as how does the fee change if we then remove ourselves from this stance that we need to have this heightened level of inspection. Like, what does that application fee change into, or does it change at all?
For me, it doesn't. I've said that the application fee is one thing, but the inspection fee is something different.
Okay.
And as we get more into the local business tax receipt, there's an inspection required for that as well. So I've proffered to put those together. There's a local business tax requirement of inspection, and then for our license for the short-term vacation rental, there's a requirement for inspection. So that's where I came up with the $250 fee.
Okay. Is there another? I believe there was somebody with a comment. I want to make sure that I get. There you go.
I'm
You're at
here.
the mic. There you
I'm
go.
here.
Could you go ahead and state your
Okay.
name and address for the record?
My name is Kevin Hines. I'm from 388 Northeast 85th Street. A lot of the things that I was going to talk about has already been talked about, but somebody did mention earlier about the need that we're going to have an extra burden for needing to monitor all the websites, 100 websites. First of all, I don't really see a need to monitor the websites and try to find people who are not compliant, because the nuisance properties are going to show themselves. So, and when the nuisance properties do show themselves, then as we've discussed, there's going to be fines for those properties. So if somebody sneaks in a rental, then, whatever. I mean, does it really hurt anything if nothing happens? So that's just what I was thinking with that. But the lower fees would make sure that that the people were more compliant with the policies that El Portal has. So if there's not really many fees that are associated with it, then what's the harm of going ahead and registering your property? So for me, if the fees are lower, then you're going to have more people saying, okay, let's do that. So let's see. Oh, and the inspection fee of even the $250 per year inspection fee, exactly what does that consist of, and how in depth is that inspection? I mean, that in itself seems like it's kind of making money for the village, because I'm sure it doesn't cost $250 for somebody to go over there for 30 minutes to do the inspection. So El Portal already has really high taxes. We've got a new building going up here that we're going to start having new tax revenue coming in. And they're about to build a lot of new things here. So I think that, that's something that needs to be addressed as well. But going back to the fees, I think that they should be as low as possible, so you have more compliance.
Thank you. I think the mayor has a comment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate it. I think that, well, first of all, the inspections weren't $250 per inspection. The $250 is the penalty for an offense, I believe.
It's also for the year.
It's for the
That's
year.
my
Yeah, it's not
recommendation.
per inspection, so it's not.
No, I did. I said it's $250 is my recommendation for the annual inspection. That's
But
one.
that was under.
And then also, as a penalty, for cause, if there is required inspection, then that's $250 additionally.
But the $250 for inspection, that was under the thought process that we would have to inspect after every single time, though. No. That was just $250 per inspection, no matter how many times a person has to be inspected.
No, it's $250 for the your initial inspection. And then I'm proffering that if there's for cause inspection required based on some complaint, then that's $250 as well. But annually, it's the application fee and the inspection of $250. That is my recommendation. I mean, we're discussing all of that.
Okay, thank you, Madam Manager. Madam Chair, what I wanted to kind of maybe suggest is that, if one way we could maybe possibly look at it is that if we want to lower the registration fee, right, greatly, maybe what we might want to look into, Madam Chair, is to heighten the penalty for those who do not register. Because we're going to lower the registration fee to kind of bring more people in to register, but you still have some people that try to skew that and say, well, F you, I'm not going to register anyway, even if we lower it down to $250 or whatever. Then we'll say, okay, you know what, we try to do you a favor. We try to lower it down to $250, which is, a low amount, and you're still going to thumb your nose in our face and just not register. So when we find out you're not registering, even off of the $250 or $200 or whatever it is, well, then we hit you with a higher penalty for not going ahead and registering. And maybe if we do that, we even get more people into registering, so they're not in the shadows. It even brings more people out. that way. It might be a suggestion, Madam Chair.
Thank you for the suggestion. I think we have one more comment in the audience. I just want to make sure everyone gets a chance to speak because we are running short on time.
Pascal DePool, 177 Northwest 90th Street. I just want to address inspections again real quick, and then also the non-registration. Right now, the ordinance doesn't require an inspection, period. It's not spelled out in the ordinance for anything. I hear, Madam Manager, that some of the things that you guys are asking us to, one of my questions is how to prove those things. An inspection would be one way to do that, obviously. If that's after every guest or not, I think it's prohibitive after every guest, but that's enough. But right now, you guys are not calling for an inspection in the ordinance. If we want to change that, fine. I understand that can be a part of local business tax receipt. That's a different story. We still haven't talked about fees and things for that. As for the non-registration of an El Portal STR, I think it's a great idea to have a huge fine for that because that's an easy thing for an owner to do. Just to put it on the record, because I didn't say it before, I'm for lower fees as well. But I think a $250, $300 fee will increase how many people register. Because if you're doing a $900 or $1,500 fee, whatever it is, and you have 10 people register, you don't have enough money to do enforcement anyway. So you'd be better off having 100 people register at $250 than 10 people at $900. Right now, the ordinance, if I violate it and if I list it on a website, there is no penalty for me listing it on a website if I rent it out or not. Other municipalities have a daily fee of me listing it on a website. If I'm in violation of an ordinance, our ordinance does not have that. Right now, if I violate the ordinance and do not license with El Portal, I'm going to pay $250 for an offense, and that's it. And that's an easy thing for us as owners to do and for the village to go after those that don't want to register that. So this is not, hey, there's a guest that's giving me a problem and I'm having a hard time figuring out what's going on in a place because that's out of my control. It is completely 100% in any of our control to get a license. If the village does an educational campaign to say, hey, if you're running an STR, this is what you will need to do. If I decide not to do that as an owner, that's on me, and I think there should be a much, much higher fine than $250, which is in the ordinance right now. That's it for this, but I think we still need to talk about business tax receipts.
Thank you so much. Does anyone else have a comment about this? There you go. Please state your name and address for the record.
Hi, my name is Jay Rivero, 225 Northeast 86th Street. First of all, I want to say thank you, Council Martin, for finally getting information out and building on this ordinance. I've been asking for this for many years. I own properties outside of El Portal. I've not had any issues with my properties. I see that, I know this is a workshop. I know that you passed out the ordinance in the last council meeting and you were ready to approve it without rates or the joke of $5 or $10. Unacceptable. I need that ordinance to be public on the website so that all of us can see what is the language on that and what revisions you're doing on it so that it could be ready for September's council meeting. Don't want to come to a meeting where the ordinance is still not finished. Don't want to come to a meeting where the rates and the requirements of the fees are not finished. The rates that are being proposed here for El Portal are extremely too high. I do not accept that. If there's rates for offenses, 1, 2, and 3, unacceptable because it's short term. It's a person that's coming in for the weekend, 3 days, 4 days. You cannot penalize me for 1 or 2 or 3 offenses when it's a short term. It's not the intent of creating a revenue stream for the village. I know we need money, but it's not for that. It's needed to be responsible. As I've told you guys before, the property behind me, I've never received the variance request. We have an 8-foot fence covering that property. We have extended construction that is bordering the fence. It has music past 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, shooting fireworks or guns or cannons, holidays, and I've reported that. I need for you to identify all of those properties. I know we have a limited code enforcement person that has to catch up on everything else. We need to identify those properties and have our police force monitor those properties, such as parking on the sidewalk, making me walk on the street, on a dark street. That is a safety hazard for me. On my own street, we have no sidewalk. And there's one property out of the 3 that I know of, the renters fly to there. There's a 20-mile limit, but they fly through that street. So, transparency by posting the ordinance. Parking, shooting, fireworks, noise. If it's owner occupied or one room rented, the rates must be a lot different. Make sure that if it's an owner in the village that's renting, we all know who they are. We could contact them and get the issue resolved. But if it's an owner that is an hour away, there's no way of getting that person in here and monitor that property. So our police force need to be made aware. It's what I'm saying. Police needs to be made aware. So noise ordinance must be incorporated there. The ordinance in current language must be clarified and get it in the website. And also, not everybody monitors the village website. Not everybody monitors the emails. Sometimes my emails come into the spam folder. Not everybody works on Instagram, Facebook, or any of that. You guys and the police need to be out there letting us know who you are, and we'll work on identifying properties with you. It's a mutual relationship here. It is not for revenue stream. It is for controlling the value of our properties, because some of those properties are dilapidated. If it's a long-term rental, there shouldn't be all of these fees. If it's owner-occupied, there shouldn't be all these fees. But if it's short-term, let's consider it. That's all I have to say.
All right, Mr. Mayor would like to comment on that? Oh, sure. I really just appreciate hearing the perspective of someone who is living in the village and has experienced maybe some of those nuisance elements that exist sometimes with short-term vacation rentals. It's good to hear from both sides to just figure out where to land that is most fair to both parties. As far as the hefty fine for non-registration, I think that is a great idea. However, even that requires a certain level of monitoring, because the first thing that happens when you try to violate someone is they'll say, I didn't rent it, right? It was just it's a noise violation. It was a cousin of mine that was there, a sister of mine. And then you run, and they can take it all the way to the special master and say, hey, this wasn't a rental. And in order for us to rebut that assumption, you need evidence, which is the posting of that and holding that property open for rent on these websites. So you do need the monitoring, even if we're talking about the enforcement of a hefty fine for non-registration. So in order for us to limit the nuisance, I think a big part of enforcement and making this a real ordinance is that monitoring piece. And I think that only a third-party provider can do that. We were just talking about the fact that there are lots of code issues in the city that needs to be handled by Mr. Herrera, and this is a really burdensome task that municipalities all around us are figuring out how to manage. But people out there are crafty in ways that you wouldn't believe. So with that being said, I'll pass it over to the mayor, and then I think we have one comment on Zoom. So, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I appreciate it. Just wanted to say one thing really quickly for clarification before I even get to that. Just wanted to say that we do have in the ordinance, you guys, that because you were saying, you brought up a good point, JR, about the individual living like 100 miles away. We do have the 20 mile from El Portal limit in the ordinance as far as the applicant compared to who's living in the house, stuff like that. It's in there, the 20 mile limit. As far as, I think there might be a little bit of confusion because, as we were talking about putting the current ordinance on the website or visible for transparency before we get to vote on it in September. So these are two different things, right? So there's no document for September yet, and that's going to be through resolution. That's just for the fees. That's what we're talking about today. The ordinance that has passed is different. It's not going to have this information in it. So that's why last meeting that we were at, when we first started talking about the fees, which came to this town hall, we went into that meeting with no document. There was no resolution created because we were going to talk about the fees, like we're doing today. From the information that comes out of the discussion about the fees, then the resolution gets created for the fee schedule. Then we vote on the resolution. And so there's nothing to really put up on the website or nothing to put out there to people right now because there's no resolution created right now. So what we can do, though, is the moment that, let's say if we come out of this town hall and we have our fee schedule down, we'll write the resolution and then we can post it on the website prior to the meeting that fourth Tuesday in September. We can do that. But right now, there's no document. Like, we're just brainstorming all the fees right now. So right now, there's no document for that.
Good. Are you right after we go to the person on Zoom who has had their hand up? If we can get them into the conversation. Yes, we can hear you.
Hi, this is Ibis Garcia. Address is 500 Northwest 87th Street, Ecuador. Couple of things that I've been hearing. Fee-wise, I agree with the rest of the attendees that have stated fees should be low. If you want participation from the people in this village, you can't make them exorbitantly high because they will find a way around it. Where there's a will, there's a way. No matter how much monitoring you do, no matter how much investigations you do, there is always a way to get around and skirt rules. So, in order for it to be compliant, you're going to want to make people want to pay that fee. So, lower fees comparable to other cities like the city of Miami or other places makes a lot more sense for that level of compliance. What one gentleman stated about the nuisance, sorry, that's my dad. The nuisance properties, they are going to show themselves. I am surrounded by rentals. I have both owner-occupied rentals and corporate entity rentals, where it's a group or conglomerate that own a house and rent it out specifically and only for events. I've had to call in for issues. One example is I had someone that I caught dumping their sewer into a field. Instead of having the septic tank repaired, they were using a pump and pumping the sewer out of their sewer tank into a field. Like it was an okay thing to do, basically. The only reason I knew it was happening is because you could smell it. And I had to call the police on that. Now, that home is not owner occupied. It is not owned by a person. It's owned by a corporation. What will happen to places like that? A lot of us are probably not aware of the complete ordinance yet. I don't personally rent, so a lot of this won't affect me personally, but it will affect me in the sense that the people around me are renting. So where is what do I say, the line there where the people that aren't renting can do or say something for the people that are renting, but still allow those people to rent their properties? Because I do believe that if you have a property that you own and you want to do something with it, you should be allowed to as well, under the right circumstances. So those are just the dilemmas that I've come across, that I would like to put out there. Because when you're dealing with an owner-occupied rental, it's easy. You can talk to the person that's living there and take care of the issue. But when you're dealing with a corporation that owns a house in the village, who do you talk to? Who do you address the issues to?
Thank you for, are you done with your comment?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for the comment. I think that's part of what we hope is addressed through this ordinance. We are at the process with talking about the fees, looking at third-party contractors, and the best way to have the residents have easy access to someone who can give them quick resolutions on things just like what you described. So hopefully, after we determine the fee and whether or not we're either going with that pared down third-party company, or if we're going with the more robust company, there should be someone that you can contact. You would be able to give the property address, and then we would be able to then go in and violate that property. So first violation incurs a fine, second incurs another fine, third, then they are eligible to have their ability to operate a short-term rental in the village revoked. And I think that is the beauty of the ordinance, because there are short-term rental properties in the village and their owners who have no intent of complying with the rules set forth. They are going to throw large parties. They are going to obstruct our abilities to use sidewalks. They are going to create noise nuisances, and it is not fair to those around them to have to shoulder that burden without recourse. So I agree with you in that persons who own their property should be able to use that property in the way that they see fit. But I think that that right is not limitless, and it is limited once you start infringing on another's ability to do the same. So hopefully, after we have this conversation and figure out exactly how we are going to go about the administration, what would result is a really quick way for you to lodge that complaint, and in response, swift action to cure the issue and bring that property into compliance. I do believe I have one more comment in the back and then another comment on Zoom, so I'll go to you first, and then I'll go back to Zoom.
Yes, hello. Kevin Hines, 388 Northeast 85th Street. We were just talking about, you were saying there's crafty people out there that are trying to get around the system or whatever. I think that's kind of looking at the homeowners as kind of the enemy, and I don't think that we want to create that atmosphere. I think that we want all this to work, and I think that to work together instead of trying to run out there and catch somebody doing something. I think that it would be more beneficial to everyone if we have low fees. We get as many people to be compliant, voluntarily compliant as possible. Make that easy to be compliant, instead of spending our resources and our money that we don't have, by the way, to run out and catch somebody doing something so we can find them. So let's just work on getting people all to get along, work on getting people to be compliant voluntarily instead of forcing people to do anything. I think that that's just the wrong way to go about it. So that's just the way I see it.
No problem. We definitely want to all work together, and this is definitely a community and one that I enjoy being a part of. But there are corporations who, I mean, their intentions aren't as straightforward. And I think in those situations, of course, we would love to legislate and hope that everyone would just willingly come into compliance. But you also have to be realistic and figure out how to make that ordinance work. And you said something earlier, and you said if they rent a couple times, if they violate the noise ordinance a couple times, is it a big deal? And I guess sometimes it isn't, but I've had the situation where there has been a property on my block that they threw a complete event where they shut down the streets. And at that point, I was pregnant and I had a baby in a stroller and had to navigate through that. And had to do that a couple of times because this property kept on doing the same thing. And I think in that situation, going through that, there is a harm. There is someone who has to bear the harm of that nuisance. And it's usually someone who is unsure as to what their recourses are. And I think we're just trying to provide them with the recourse. Hold on one second. I'll give you a chance to rebut, but just come back to the podium and state your name and address for the record again.
Yes, hello, Kevin Hines, 388th Street. That's not what I said. I did not say it's okay for it to have a nuisance one or two times and what's the harm. That's not what I said.
Okay, well, I apologize for miss speaking. You can go ahead and let's say what you said.
What I did say, let me speak. What I did say is that if somebody were to vacation rent one or two times and there's no problem, then what's the harm? I never said what's the harm if there's a noise violation one or two times. That is a problem. That's violating other people that live in their property, that are want their peace and quiet in their home. Then they don't want to deal with that. Look, if I've got somebody next door to me that's vacation renting and it's a nuisance and it's constantly a nuisance or even a nuisance at one time, it bothers me. I don't want to deal with that, and I get it. I think that if you're going to do this with your property, then you need to monitor it yourself. The noise devices that they have, then that's a great thing. I think that you need to put those things in your property. I think that you should be able to monitor your property. But that being said, also Airbnb has, and I'm new to it. I do have two myself, but I'm new to it. But it's my understanding that, and I know that on Airbnb, just like the host has a rating, so do the guests. So the guests have a rating, and so personally myself, if the guest doesn't have a rating, then I'm not going to rent to them. Sorry, it's like because, and if it does have a rating, then you can see what kind of guest that person is. You can see if they've had problems before because they have. People who've rented to them before are going on and making a report about what they do as well. So the hosts have it, but so do the guests. So there is a way for you to kind of know what you're renting to. So just to clarify. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate the clarification, and I think we're violently agreeing that definitely multiple nuisance violations is not something that any property owner should have to bear without any sort of recourse. And I think that this ordinance and what we're doing today will help us figure out the best way to do that to make sure that we can all coexist peacefully and enjoy our properties. I have a comment on Zoom, but I think that that's Councilwoman Life Ward, and she can go ahead and join the conversation freely. Councilwoman? I can hear you now.
I just wanted to say that saying this so that everyone will know that we appreciate you. We really do. Councilman Moore has been creative in wanting this workshop. And without your comments, we are wrestling with this state mandate just like everyone else. I saw what happened to Councilwoman Martin when she was pregnant. I'm sympathetic to the people that want this for property, and they've all spoken well. I think the council can agree. They've all spoken well for benefit of the village. What I'm hearing here now is we are just trying to put it together. It is a state mandate that we must do. It's not like we want to, we must do it. And as Councilwoman, as the last speaker said, he understands. He's not fighting us. We're not fighting one another. If people can understand that we're not fighting one another. We have the same feelings. We're the same people that live in this village and have people next door to us. What we're trying to do here is simply come to a happy medium. We won't get there by ourselves, but we will get there as long as people understand we're not fighting each other. We're looking for solutions to how we do this. One of the things I've often talked to my legislature with is, we got into this situation, we can get out. The state put us this way, they can take it out. I'm sure we're not the only city that's having this disruption, but with it being on the as a state mandate now, we don't have the under the table shenanigans that had appeared throughout the years. So to everyone, we're not enemies. We're trying to work this out together. No one is satisfied with the way that the state placed this mandate upon all the citizens here in Florida. So thank you, Madam Chair, for providing the opportunity to express what I can hear on this side, not being in the public view, but from the resident side of how we're expressing. We really do want solutions. And if we have three options, we just have to pick one. The fees may be high, but what the intent is, if we have any kind of fees that will be even neutral to everyone else, the intent is that we are all on the same page with cities of our size and larger. Thank you, Madam Chair, for allowing me the comments, because I'm seeing it now from this side, not from the side that I sit on as a council person on this council. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Councilwoman. I think I have one more comment on Zoom, and then I'm going to go to Mr. Depew. I know, I see you. Do we still have that commenter on Zoom?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Hi, my name is Corey Welch. I own my home at 196 Northwest 91st Street. I do not currently run or have a short-term rental, but the neighbors behind me do, and both neighbors on each side of me do have long-term renters. I've never had any problem with any of them. And again, they're all owner occupied. If we did have any sort of issue, I would contact the owners. And I think when you talk about these nuisance properties, they obviously make themselves known. I don't think that you're going to have to be doing much research to find out, which ones are the problems. So I do think that the registration fees should be small. Also, earlier it was discussed about how small our budget and personnel in the village are. But we also already pay, I think the second or third highest tax rate in the county. So I think, the fees should be as low as possible. I don't think Abuela, who is on a fixed income renting a single room in her home, trying to make ends meet, should be paying, the same as some corporation renting out a giant party house. So again, I would just like to advocate for lower permit fees.
And thank you so much for the comment. We are closing in a little at the end. I'm gonna let Mr. Depew address the group. However, I do want to just make one quick comment. It's not that the properties won't be known to us. The reason why we definitely want them monitored is for that enforcement piece. So even if they're known to us and we don't have them technically, the ability to identify them as a short-term vacation rental, then conceivably they could just rack up an endless amount of noise ordinance violations, right? If we're able to identify them as a short-term vacation rental and they were to conduct this nuisance repeatedly on their third offense, we would be able to then revoke their ability to operate and also seek additional legal recourse. And I think that is the piece in our ordinance that is important and kind of requires that sort of heightened monitoring that is contemplated by utilizing a third-party provider. And I also have an interest in making these fees as reasonable as possible, and nobody wants Abuela not to be able to rent out her back room or whatever. We don't. And one of the big takeaways that I have written down, and I think I've already addressed with the manager, is to have our attorney look at whether or not we can treat owner-occupied residences very different from non-owner-occupied residencies, and also include Vice Mayor Urbaum's suggestion of broadening that interpretation of owner-occupied if someone owns multiple residences in the village. So with that being said, I'll kick it over to Mr. DePue.
Pascal DePool, 177 Northwest 90th Street. I'd love to get to the El Portal business tax receipt, but before I do, I think just two quick clarifications. DBPR does not require annual or semi-annual inspections for single-family homes. We get a license without them, and we can renew it online. There is no inspection there. And then Mayor just brought up to my attention, you guys talk about an inspector in the ordinance, but that is after I'm violating something, and then you send somebody in to either make sure I corrected it or to validate that there is actually an offense there. There is no inspection requirement in the ordinance in terms of getting the license. It is for enforcement. As we're putting the fees into this ordinance through a resolution, I would like to suggest an option to you guys, because we can do another resolution in a year. So let's do a resolution now with low fees, try it out, see how it works, get the lower of the two third companies that Madam Manager had talked about, see if we can make it work, and then come back to us in a year and go, hey, we've tried this, we're doing it with a low fee, we need to pass another resolution and up the fee, and here's the reason why to do that. It's easy to do because it's not the ordinance, it's just the resolution.
You've done this before.
I have not done this before.
That is definitely something that we can do. So that's the thing. When you're operating in this space, which is a new space for a lot of municipalities, there is a lot of benchmarking based on what other municipalities have experienced. And I think what we're doing now is looking to similarly sized municipalities, not just in population, but especially with staffing needs. And then benchmarking our number based on what it is they've experienced in administering their program. So there is a tremendous amount of the unknown, but definitely an ability for us to revisit this number and its appropriateness, not even in a year. We can do it at any time. So with that being said, I want to kick it over to the manager just so she can talk about the business tax receipt, because I know that was something that everyone wanted to hear about. So Madam Manager.
Thank you, Councilperson Martin. Yes, under the way we the ordinance, the business tax receipt will be another requirement for occupational license. You're running a business from a home within a residential area, so the BTR or local business tax receipt is required. But under section 11-12 of our ordinance, we have the fee schedule. And presently at section 97, it just says rooming houses or lodging houses. I'm looking for that which closest, that's closest to the short-term vacation rental portion of this in terms of the fees. Rooming houses or lodging houses in which there are more than 3 beds for the use of lodgers or roomers, or in which more than 6 paying guests are allowed to sleep. That is $27 for the first 20 rooms. I want us to really look at short-term rental probably wouldn't fall under that, or would, I'm asking that we also consider, if we're going to look at the ordinance and maybe suggesting changes, that we also do something to affect the business tax receipt enumeration of fees, so that we can set it. I mean, the fee of $27 for 20 rooms, for each additional room over $23. We know that usually these short-term rental, especially under our present ordinance that just passed 2 months ago, that we're talking about maximum occupancies that are based on square footage of the home, or square footage of the home that has air condition. So every home will be different. I don't think this is going to cover it in the way we need it to. So let's also consider adding short-term rental to the fee schedule for business tax receipt. And the inspection requirements, again, I stated this before, we have the $75 inspection fee for business tax receipt anyway. We can put that in with the this permit, or, I mean, but I just ask that we consider that when we make these changes.
Madam Chair, if I may, very quickly, Madam Chair. Okay, so as we start to dial this down, Madam Chair, one of the first action items that we have to take out of this, Madam Chair, which you have brought up a couple of times, is the owner-occupier versus non-owner-occupier. There's also a Part B to that. That's Part A, right? There's also a B to that, which is the Vice Mayor's suggestion about owning multiple homes in El Portal. That's one action item. Another action item to take out of this is the decision of whether we're going to lower the registration fee, and maybe we'll have a special non-registration penalty. That is a very high penalty for those individuals that, even though we're lowering the fee to an amount that is understandable, if they still try to skirt the registration fee, we have a very high non-registration penalty fee. That could be different from the other general fees. It could just be the non-registration penalty fee, which is very high, that punishes those individuals that still try to get around not being registered. That's another action item. We do have a couple of action items. I'll go back and look at this video. I'll send the email out. We do have a couple action items, particularly pertaining to the ordinance itself and suggestions about altering things in the ordinance itself. I'll go back, look at this video. I'll write an email about those action items. You probably have your own, Madam Chair, but those are the two main ones that I've seen coming out of this: the owner-occupier and the registration fee being lowered.
Okay.
And then,
okay, go ahead.
And then one more, just so it's on the record, is thinking about our definition of vacation rental, and bringing that more in line with what the DBPR defines it as. So those that contemplate to just rent out during Christmas for safety or something of the like wouldn't fall under this at all.
Okay. Councilperson Martin, I know Mr. Pascal wants to make a statement. I just want to really quickly go to the portion about advertisement or operation of a short-term vacation rental without a license. In the ordinance, it presently states that it is subject to arrest and if found guilty, perhaps a first-degree misdemeanor, suspension, or revocation of business tax receipt, in addition to other fines and penalties. We've talked about it being a little more hefty, so we do have something in there, but
that's pretty hefty. But I get where we're trying to go. Mr. Depew, go ahead.
I'd love to know on the business. Like I said earlier, I'm sorry, Pascal DePoule, 177 Northwest 90th Street. Like you guys don't know where I live. I'd like to, on the business tax receipt, I'd like to know too, just who can ask for that, or who can sign up for that. Because when I was here yesterday, I understand that the staff has no instructions on this because this is new. But the way the form is laid out, there has to be a business name to do a short-term rental, or a business license in general. And when they asked me, when I had filled this in with me and my wife's name as an individual with our social security number versus a federal tax ID number, they weren't sure on that, so that's something that needs to be clarified. The other thing too, in terms of the cost of that, we've been paying in Miami Shores Village business tax receipt for a home that we rent long-term, and that is $56.95 per year. In addition to whatever other things. So I think That's about in line of what I would expect to see on a local business tax. That's higher than if I would run a business out of my home. It's a little lower if I'd run an insurance company at $105 you guys have right now, but that's kind of right in the middle there. But I'd love to see, if we're discussing fees today, I'd love to see if we can nail down that fee today as well, or if that's just something that we're going to have to wait till September and have another discussion on, in terms of that being a prohibitive fee again, with an inspection that's prohibitive and all those things. So those are just my 2 cents here. Again, thank you.
Madam
Thank
Chair,
you.
if I may, Madam Chair.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just really quickly, you guys, thank you for bringing that up, Mr. DuPaul. I think that, that's another action item to find out that fee. You said you want to know that fee. We'll look into that. We'll do that also, Madam Chair, as an action item. I think that what we have to also understand going forward, you guys, is, as I stated before, the earliest that these fees could be voted on is the 4th Tuesday of September. The ordinance does not go into effect until after the resolution is passed and codified. For a resolution to be codified, or any resolution or ordinance has to be signed by the mayor, the village clerk, and the attorney for any ordinance. Then it has to be filed with the county, state of Florida, United States of America. Okay, so there's a lot in between that. Now, I appreciate you, but you coming in yesterday to get information of business tax, in connection with a short-term rental, you guys have to understand that we're talking about the fees right now. Once we get this stuff down, the staff's going to be trained. There'll be documents, right? There'll be papers. They'll have everything up front ready to go. So you have to understand, we have to get, because if we were to go and train the staff on half information, it's a waste of everybody's time. Once everything gets down and everything's been codified and everything's been voted on and passed, you guys, even when we pass this, that 4th Tuesday, if it passes, of September, we can still say that now that everything is passed and now that we have the final result of everything, we won't let it kick in for 60 more days so we can train everybody and get everything in place. All right? We're not going to spring it on you like, tomorrow everybody needs to be here by 5 p.m. or you're violated. It's not like that, all right? We're going to all work together on this, okay? We're going to all make sure everything works out the right way, all right? I promise you that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Awesome. Well, we are at actually 3 minutes over our closing time. But what I do want to do is thank everybody that took the time out this morning to come and talk about this topic. These conversations are unbelievably helpful, whether or not you agree with anything I say or the manager says or any one of us up here. The fleshing out of these topics are useful and helpful in us figuring out the best way to administer this program, how those forms should appear, what conversation should we have with other governmental entities that are also taxing this activity as far as streamlining for you guys. So this has been super helpful. I've taken these notes down. I encourage you to contact me if you have any additional questions or concerns. My email address is on the website, dmartin@villageofelportal.org. In addition to that, I have an Instagram page that is solely dedicated to the Village of El Portal. I think it's Councilwoman Martin. So all of those avenues are available for us to continue this dialogue and hopefully come up with a really tight document in an area where a lot of people are in flux. I mean, there are some cities who do it better. Those cities usually have tremendously large code enforcement departments. We are working with something a lot smaller and trying to deliver service that is just as good. And we appreciate your support because even the challenging conversations help us provide a better product. So thank you so much for coming out this morning. I appreciate you guys. The donuts are still back there. Let's get to it, guys. All right. Bye-bye. Thank you.